Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Jensen, Chief Operations Officer here at Cash Practice Systems. Thank you for joining our webinar today, which is all about care plans. We're going to go through and share with you important information of why you want to use care plans in your practice to not only increase collections, but improve patient outcomes. With me today is our founder and CEO, Dr. Miles Bodson. So we've got a lot of material to cover, Dr. Bodson. Let's go ahead and just dive right in.
Well, thank you so much, and looking forward to sharing. We see we have a nice group of people on today, doctors, and I'm assuming some CAs as well, possibly, that are on right now. And we couldn't do things without our CAs, so I'm glad you guys are here, those that are CAs, as well as every doctor on right now. This is one of our favorite topics to talk about is care planning, and especially from the standpoint of that it's not just about the money, of course. It's not just about the money. We're all doctors here to take care of people and improving clinical outcomes. And we have found that care planning is such a critical part of that. So we're going to focus on that today. And I hope you get a lot of value out of it. So grab a pen, get ready to take some notes. We are here to really deliver a lot of content for you guys today, to be able to really roll up your sleeves and have some improvements in the practice. So with that being said, let me share my screen and do this presentation for you guys. All right, here we go. Today's topic, let me see. There we go. Increasing collections and improving patient outcomes with care plans. So hopefully you guys are on your computers watching this. You're not just on your phone. If you're just listening, maybe you'll come back and watch the slides later. With that being said, let's get started. A couple just kind of quick disclaimers. Anytime we do a presentation like today that will show examples of fees, it shows examples of care plans, we as a disclaimer just got to let you know that that's just for educational purposes. By no means are we suggesting or recommending you charge the fees that we're showing. You guys will set your own fees as an example. Although we're not discussing insurance today in any real way, we also want to just quickly state we're not endorsing you necessarily boycotting or leaving some insurance company. And then the other thing I'll mention is that we'll show you some examples of outcomes that doctors experience in their practices when they do these things. Of course, performance of another doctor is totally that doctor. For you to have same or similar experience, you have to put in the work. So again, any kind of examples of past performance is not a guarantee that you'll have the same performance. You have to put in the work. Okay, with that being said, let me start a little bit of our story. Some of you on here right now may have heard of Speak before, and some of you may not. I just want to get a little background real quick. That's me on the far right there, and the three ladies there in the center are Lori, Holly, and Laura. And there's Holly right in the middle, who just introduced today. And this picture is probably about, I would say, about 20, 22 years old. It's quite some time ago that this picture was taken. Real quick, I just want to share that where this material is coming from that we're going to teach you guys today, it isn't just stuff we made up. This is stuff from real world practice that I practiced for nearly 20 years in Southern California. And without spending a tremendous amount of time on my story, I'll just share this. And that is, I ran into a lot of challenges in practice in my early days, struggles, literally to the point where I was ready to give up on practice, that I was ready to kind of throw in the towel. It got so bad that my wife, myself, and my little girl had to move back in with my parents, couldn't afford to live, that level of, really struggling. And then I finally got some advice. I got some help. And the initial help I got to overcome the challenges I was having was going to be the topic we're talking about today, which is how to do care planning. That's really what turned the corner for me, that I learned how to do care planning and present care to patients, and eventually got really good at doing so, where it eventually led to a place of tremendous success in the practice. And it's really the foundation of the growth and of my own personal experience of practice. And we're now in a position at our company, Cash Practice, where we've literally helped thousands and thousands of practices. And those that really embrace the idea of care planning are the ones that we see routinely succeeding beyond the practices that don't do this. So we've just seen through our own personal experience, as well as the experience of thousands of others, how important care planning is, and it's why we're focusing on it today. And we've gone on now that this topic of cash-based practices, care planning, all of this type of stuff has gained so much traction that Holly and I now have the privilege of traveling around the country, speaking at different state associations, different events. I think this is a picture of us here in Arkansas recently, speaking at one of their conventions. And we're around teaching this stuff all the time.
And they're thrilled to hear the content. That's why they're like, yay!
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to share that with you guys today. And again, here's me there on the cover of the magazine. again, this topic, it's gained a lot of attention. That's what ultimately led to me being on the cover of the American Chiropractor, and Holly likewise on the cover of the Chiropractic Assistant, is that this topic of care planning and cash-based practice and freedom from insurance dependence, however you want to phrase it, has gained so much traction. It gained a lot of attention. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it today. So why is care planning the foundation of practice growth and better clinical outcomes? Like, why is it the foundation of it? Well, what we've seen is that care planning plays a critical role in patients following through with care. That I think we'd all agree that if you had lightning bolts flying out of your fingertips to adjust your patients, and you were so good at your technique that people got well just by you laying your hands on them, would it matter how good your technique was if people weren't following through with care? That one of the major reasons us chiropractors don't get the best results with a patient isn't necessarily because we don't have great technique or we don't know what we're doing. It has everything to do with the fact that the patient's not following through, generally is the case. And what we've seen is patient follow through, patients sticking to your recommendations of care is tremendously impacted on how well you do care planning. And it's why we say it's the foundation of it. Not only does care planning improve clinical outcomes because patients stick to care, but also it leads to better financial growth in the practice. Care planning is really all about two things. It's about forecasting the time commitments your patients are making to you, which is your treatment plan, basically, how much time they're giving you, how many months they're coming in, how often they're coming in, what is it you're doing, as well as the money commitments. What are they financially committing to? And we're going to address both of those topics today. When it comes to the forecasting of time, really what it comes down to is, what is it you're trying to do with your patients? When it comes to forecasting time, I like to say, what is your product? Let's just talk about this, right? What do I mean by this? When patients come to you, what are they buying from you? When they come to you and they're giving you their time and their money, what are they getting in exchange in return for that? Because ultimately, when they say yes to you at a report of findings and they hire you and they're in getting care, they're expecting something at the end of that. Another way of thinking about it, your product is what we call your deliverable, your result, your outcome, or your clinical outcome, your objective goal. It all means the same thing. It's basically the end result. What are they walking away with at the end of them giving you that time and money? And if you don't know, doctor, what your product is that you deliver in your practice, I got to let you know, and you probably recognize this, by default, patients will just assume that your product is pain relief. Meaning when they come to you, when patients come to us, we know they're generally, in most cases, they're hurting. They have some kind of symptomatology going on, and they want relief from that. And they come in by default expecting that's what they're going to get from you is simply pain relief. And the question I have for you is there more to it in your practice? Are you doing more than pain relief, or is it just pain relief? And if it is just pain relief and that's your decision, that's your business. But most chiropractors, 90+% of chiropractors know that what they're doing is more than just symptomatic improvement. Let me use an analogy. Orthodontists have figured this out. If I was to ask you, what is the product of an orthodontist? When you go there, I think it's pretty clear that if you take your daughter there, your child there, your son there, and you give them the commitment that you're going to bring your kid in there for the next 36 months. So that's your time commitment. And once a month for the next 36 months. And the money commitment is you're going to give them a bunch of money, $10,000, whatever it is. So there's a money commitment and a time commitment. What do you expect the outcome is going to be at the end of that? I think you would agree that if at the end of 3 years and a bunch of money, if your kid still had crooked teeth, you would go, wait a second, this isn't what I paid for, right? You expect your kid's going to have straight teeth at the end of that. That is the product you're expecting when you commit to the time and money. What I show you here is the orthodontist doesn't sell braces. They sell smiles. They sell straight teeth. And I ask you, doctors, what are you selling in your practice? Are you selling just simply adjustments? Are you selling laser therapy? Are you selling pain relief? Or are you selling some kind of outcome, some kind of result as a result of what you do? I got to tell you, patients aren't there to buy your decompression sessions. They're not there to buy your laser sessions. They're not there to buy just your chiropractic adjustments. They are there because, well, one, they want symptomatic improvement. But if you're not clear on what you deliver beyond that, then that's all they expect from you. So the question I have for you is what is your product and why is it so important? Because ultimately the product you sell dictates how much time you're going to forecast. Meaning, if in your practice model, it's all about symptomatic improvement, and in my practice model, it's about restoring a cervical curve, the time commitments to accomplish those goals are different. They're different, right? To get someone feeling better, sometimes that can happen in one visit. It could take maybe maybe a dozen visits. But we know that if you're going to try to restore someone's function or to restore a cervical curve, that may be months and months of time. So it's very important, doctors, that you get very clear on what it is you're delivering, because ultimately that'll dictate the time associated with the care plan you build. So when we talk about care planning, one of the things you need to get good at is well, what do I believe the estimated treatment plan is going to be, which is all about time. How much time are you going to forecast? So I ask you the question, and if you don't know the answer right now, you need to get to the answer to this. Every time I've done this one-on-one with a doctor, ultimately they have kind of an epiphany that they realize I'm not very clear on what I'm delivering, that what is it you deliver in your practice? So you got to get clear on that. Here's some examples, like, is it going from a straight neck to a curved neck? As an example, that was an example from my own personal practice. In my own personal practice, I was really big into a structural correction. So if a patient came in with headaches or neck pain, or I don't care what it was they were coming in with, when I evaluated them, if I determined they had a cervical alordosis, the product that I was offering them, that at the end of the time and money commitment, we would expect to see a change on their X's. We would expect to see a cervical curve restored. That's obviously beyond just symptomatic improvement. Or is it functional improvement where you're taking them from let's say a D to a higher letter grade? Or you're taking them from a D to a B using our wellness score as an example, where you're measuring other things besides x-rays. Maybe you're measuring their posture, their range of motion, the tenderness on palpation, how many subluxations they have, all kinds of things you can measure. Bottom line is there's something you're measuring to show them they've made an improvement towards an objective goal. Examples of products you could have in your practice. It could be you're restoring the alignment to the spine, you're removing subluxation, you're restoring cervical curves, you're restoring motion to the spine, removing nerve interference if you're more neurologically based. Whatever it is you're doing, just get clear on it. And I'm not here to dictate what it should or shouldn't be. That's not my job. Your job is to say, this is what I do, and is it beyond symptomatic improvement? And get clear on that. Because ultimately, for you to care plan properly, you need to know what that is. I just want to clarify that. We want to start with the end in mind, which is what are you trying to accomplish with your patients? So once you get clear on that, then there's different practice growth models, the way you recommend the time, as well as the way you collect the money that will impact the growth of that practice. So we're talking about growing the practice with your care planning. Step one is get clear on what is your outcome you're trying to accomplish, because that'll help you define the time period you're going to be recommending. And then when it comes to actually building that plan and collecting the money, there's multiple ways of doing it, and various ways will also impact the growth of that practice. So let's go through some different examples. Example one is you're doing one visit at a time. What I mean by time, what I'm getting at here is that when you're forecasting the time for the patient that's required for them to get care, if you're in the practice model of just one visit at a time, meaning when you do a report of findings with a patient, you're simply saying to them, let's get you started. I'll have you do an adjustment. And then next visit, I'll let you know if you need another adjustment. You're not really projecting time out to the future. You're just simply doing one visit at a time. That's one form of practice. Generally, these offices are very symptom-based or insurance-based when I talk to these doctors. Also, from a money perspective, they're usually collecting money one visit at a time. And what we often see in practices like this, that their PVA, their patient visit average, the length of time a patient stays the course of care. And again, if we're talking about them following through with care, in these practices, we generally see a PVA right around 12 visits, which is what the national average in America is right now. That we see that on average, patients only stay around 10 to 12 visits is what we generally see. Now, if we were to think about that financially, what impact that has on your practice when we're talking about growth, financial growth of the practice, using an example, I'm just going to throw a number out. Let's say it's $50 a visit. Okay. Depending on your practice, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. But in this example, I'm going to say it's $50. That 12 visits represents about $600 of revenue to the practice. So here's a practice where the time model is I'm seeing you visit by visit. Likely the goal of care in that practice is merely just pain relief, is likely all it is. They're going to collect money one visit at a time. And because of that, they get stuck around 12 visits. And if they're collecting on average $50 a visit, they only generate about $600 from that one patient. The next type of time commitment or forecasting, we would say here, is what we call exam to exam. Doctor, this is where in a report of findings, you tell the patient, let's get you started with care. I'll see you for the next month. I'll see you 2 or 3 times a week. And then at the end of the month, I'll reevaluate you and we'll take it from there. Where the commitment that you're having with the patient or the recommendation of time or the forecasting of time is simply enough care to get them to the next exam. And the intention here is that every progress exam, you're going to then tell them whether they need more care or not. So as far as the patient's concerned, they don't know they need more care until you get to that next progress exam. This is sort of like an orthodontist saying, well, let's get you started with care, and every month I'll let you know if you still need more care. They never tell you at the beginning it's going to be 3 years or 4 years. They just simply get you started. In this model, generally the type of revenue, or not revenue, but the way they collect money in this type of practice is often what we call a block of visits. So what is a block of visits? That's where, let's say you recommended they get started with care and they're going to need 10 or 12 visits to get to the next progress exam or the first progress exam. In essence, the patient purchases 10 or 12 visits at that moment in time. So they prepay for 10 visits or 12 visits, and they purchase that to, and then they get to the progress exam. And then every progress exam, you as the doctor now have to talk to them about, do they need more care? And if they do, it's time for them to buy again. And generally they'll buy another block of visits. And every time there's a progress exam, when I talk with these doctors, often they tell me they feel a little uneasy about it because they know that the patient has to make a decision about buying more care. And oftentimes we end up losing people along the way. And because of that, because it's a new financial decision every progress exam, we end up seeing many patients dropping out after 2 or 3 progress exams, even though they still need care. And in fact, when I talk with these doctors, philosophically, they want to have a product that's, removing subluxations or restoring posture. They want to do that. But when you observe them in practice or I consult with them, generally when you talk to them, they're speaking the language of symptom improvement. That what they're actually wanting to do versus what they're actually doing is incongruent. That there's this sense of, I want to do corrective care, but I'm talking about symptoms all the time. And as a result, these doctors I often find are very conflicted in their practice. But nonetheless, in this model, we see practices kind of plateau around 24 to 36 visit PVA. And again, using that $50 per visit model, they end up generating about $1,800 on average per patient when it comes to this business model in the practice, or this forecasting of time and collecting money this way. Now, I will say in both of these examples, there may be a time and a place for these types of models for specific patients, but I wouldn't use it as a general model for care planning for my overall practice or generally what I'd like to do with new patients. The next type of time commitment or forecasting is what we refer to as a care plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Care planning is where you literally tell the patient the start to finish, everything they're going to need to accomplish the goal. So again, if your goal in practice, your product, your outcome, whatever you want to call it, is cervical curve restoration, I'll use that as an example, or if it's removing subluxation, or it's improving posture, or it's improving function, it's everything you need to do to accomplish that goal. It's not this amount of care to get you feeling better, and then later we'll talk about something else. It's not that. It's everything from day one to the end result, which is, again, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 8 months, maybe it's a year, whatever you think is required to accomplish that clinical outcome. So that's the care plan. Now, when it comes to care planning, and we're going to talk about this today, how you collect the money for that can vary. One method of collecting for a care plan is the traditional prepay model. This is where you learn how to sell your care plans and how you talk people into prepaying. And I say talk people into it because most people don't prepay for things in their life. Most of the people that come into your practice do not purchase cars that way. They don't buy houses that way. They don't make major expensive, big expensive purchases by prepaying. Most people don't do that. That's why I say most doctors who do prepays have to learn how to sell really well to do it. But nonetheless, it is a model out there that's often taught. I'm not a fan of it myself, but it is taught. And I'll share with you in my own personal practice, early on, I learned to do this. And I got really good at doing prepays. And this is what kind of turned the corner for me of doing care planning and doing prepays. But then 1 week in practice, I had this one thing happen, and that is I had 3 military families who had all prepaid me care, and then something happened in the military where they all had to be transferred out of town. So I had to stop their programs and have the pleasure of writing them all refund checks. So between those three families, I had to write about $10,000 in refunds that week. Now, I could do it. The money was there. It was, that was fine, but I didn't like it. And I realized, wow, this sucks. This is not a great way to run my business, is to have all this money that I've collected that's really not mine. It's not the business's until I've rendered the services. So there's some challenges there. And the other thing I've seen with prepay programs is that at the end of the prepay, many of those patients didn't transition onto wellness care. And there's a reason for that they didn't transition on, mainly because of the fact they had to make a new financial decision at the end of the program in order to transition to wellness. But nonetheless, it is an option available. And we see in these practices, they do have a higher retention level. Their PVAs generally around 50 to 75, and they do collect more money. I mean, their case averages are much higher when you're doing these programs. And this is why I believe they're so popular, is that doctors love to do the care planning. They learn how to do it, which is great. But then they're talked into this idea that I need to do prepay programs. And they work, don't get me wrong. But the practices that do these, generally what we see is they have a terrible re-sign rate when it comes to their wellness programs. The fourth model we're going to talk about is, again, care planning. You're still recommending a comprehensive program of care for people, which is, again, we're going to dive into that today. But when it comes to the money side of things, instead of it being a prepay, they choose to do a monthly auto debit. And this is what turned the corner for me personally. In my own practice, when I had that experience with the military families leaving, I said there had to be a better way. And I got some advice, and it was suggested to me to start doing monthly payments and automate those things. And when we did that, man, did our practice grow. And that we've seen now, again, with thousands of practices, the same thing, these practices really take off. And we see PVAs now in the neighborhood of 150 plus. In my own personal practice, when I retired, our PVA was just over 300 visits. That's a tremendous level of retention. In fact, that's 24 times the national average. And that practice now is going to be generating closer to $7,500 per patient versus $3,750 with the prepay versus only $600 with the per visit. So I hope you can see what, as I illustrate here, the way you recommend time, which is your treatment plan, varies from per visit to exam to a comprehensive care plan. And the way you collect the money in each of these models will also dictate your retention. And again, I'm showing you here retention tied to money, but retention is also tied to your clinical outcomes. That ultimately, for your patients to get the best clinical results, they need to stick to the program, right? They need to follow through, and prematurely self-dismissing or prematurely dropping out is the number one reasons I believe that patients don't get the full benefits of the chiropractic care that you may be recommending. So that's why we say care planning is the foundation of practice growth and clinical outcomes. It really dictates and sets up whether your patient's going to be able to follow through or not. So I have a question for you. Yes, Holly, go ahead.
I want to add, can you go back to that last slide for just a second, please? The impact, you just talked about the impact that it has on patients getting results because they're following through, but also the impact that it has in the operations of the practice. It's much more joyful and rewarding to work in a practice where you're not having constant financial conversations with patients, where you're not chasing down money, where the financial conversation is handled very strategically at the start of care or the transition to the next phase of care. And it not only streamlines things at the front desk, but patients appreciate that as well.
Absolutely. You're 100% right in that I know, and we're speaking from experience here ourselves, that in practice, it's a joyful environment, right? It's a joyful environment. I showed you that picture at the beginning of us in front of the practice. There was me, Holly, Laura, and Lori. And I told you that picture is over 2 decades old. It's 20 years ago. All 3 of those ladies are still working with me today, 20 years later. Why? Because we have such joy in what we do, right? There's joy in the practice model, the business model, meaning it alleviates a lot of the stresses that go on in a practice. So when we go through this, I have a question for you guys. Have you ever wondered how much money your practice could make if all of the enrollments and retention ratios were optimal? Meaning, if you were optimally enrolling as many people as you could into care plans, and they were all following through, or most, we'll say, were following through, and nobody's going to be perfect, right? Most were enrolling and most were staying. Have you ever thought about how much money you would be making? Not just the clinical outcomes and the benefit, but literally, have you ever calculated it? And if you haven't, and most doctors I talk to tell me, no, I never really kind of went through this process, I want to take you through an example of this. I want to show you what's your growth potential. And I'll give you a link at the end of this part of this section here of how you can actually do this for yourself. But I'm going to give you an example of what this might look like. And then you can go do it on your own later on to see the actual potential of your practice. We're going to look at a couple things. One's called your annual enrollment potential. And then we're going to look at your annual retention potential. And then we're going to look at a combination of both. What does this mean? Annual enrollment potential is basically saying, if you improved your enrollments, your conversions of people getting care, how much more money would you make? And if you improved your retention, that people followed through better on your care plannings, what would that look like? And when you do both, I'm going to show you how it actually exponentially increases the practice. And then how would that impact you over the life of your practice? I mean, the career, like, are you practicing 10 more years, 15 more years? Really, how much potential is there? So let's go through an example real quick. There's some basic data. Let's look at a typical practice. Here's a practice that's seeing 20 new patients a month, 20 new consultations. These are 20 people who walked through the door, had a consultation with a doctor. And of those 20 consultations, we're saying this practice enrolled 13 of them. They presented a care plan, and 13 out of the 20 said yes. They did a report of findings, and they enrolled in care. And we're going to say in this practice that their PVA currently is around 20 visits, and they're averaging $60 a visit per patient, or per visit, I should say. So that's a pretty typical practice. You may be higher, you may be lower. And again, you can go through this exercise on your own later, but I just want to give you an example of this. We're going to also set a goal here. And the goal is we want to improve that enrollment rate from 13 visits, oh, I'm sorry, not 13 patients to 18. So we're going to say out of the 20 consultations, they got better at the report of findings, better at care planning, and they enrolled 18 out of 20 instead of 13 out of 20. That's goal number one. And goal number two is, because we're doing better care planning, we're going to have better retention. And as a result, now I shouldn't say automatically. There are other things that need to go on in retention side of things, but care planning is a foundation of that. And when you do proper care planning, we expect to see your PVA, your retention increase. So we're going to say here the PVA almost doubled. It went from 20 to 38. Now, again, if you do this on your own, you may change the numbers and see how it comes out. But for this illustration, I want to show you this is not an unusual example of showing improvement when you apply the care planning. So annual enrollment potential. In this example, we see that going from enrolling 13 out of 13 out of 20 going from 13 out of 20 to 18 out of 20 enrolling, it increased the revenue of that practice $72,000 per year. That's based upon a $60 visit there. That's where this is coming from. Based on $60 visit, enrolling an additional 5 new patients a month resulted in $72,000 per year. We call that the annual enrollment potential, and that will cause growth. In fact, this is often when we see doctors learn how to do a better report of findings. They learn how to, maybe they even learn how to do prepays. They learn how to get more people signed up for care. And this is where we see these practices grow. That's one component of growth, is improving that report of findings and that care planning. The next is the retention side of things, the annual retention potential. This is where we say your PVA has increased. So we went from a 20 PVA to a 38 PVA, which means patients are just staying with you. They're staying the course of care. They're getting better clinical outcomes. And as a result, your practice is going to grow. What you'll see here, though, is that the growth is actually higher than it is with just converting more people care. Generally, we see retention have a bigger impact on your bottom line than getting better at your conversions. That just keeping people longer will have a greater impact. In this example, again, based on $60 a visit and going from a 20 PVA to a 38 PVA, it increased the revenues about $168,000 a year, a little over that, just from that change right there. Now, I also want to clarify in this example here, when we're doing this, this is not more patients getting care. It's the same 13. I want to clarify. 13 out of 20 started. We're just saying they stayed longer. What happens when we do both, when we actually improve enrollment and retention, we get better at care planning, we get better at enrolling them in care, and of course, we're getting better at keeping them. When you combine the two, it actually increases. It's not just adding what you had from enrollment increase and retention increase. It's actually it's an exponential growth, is what we like to say here, is that you have more people who started care and they're all staying longer. In this case, it was over $300,000 of additional revenue per year in this example, where we went from a 13 out of 20 signing up to 18. And we took those 18 people, and instead of them only staying 20 visits, now staying 38 visits, it was over $300,000 of revenue per year. Now, for some practices, that may be double your revenue. I mean, that might be a 2x of your current practice right now. And what we see is this happens year after year with practices, that they continue to add people and the practice continues to grow. Now, what we end up seeing is, if you look at this and we said 15 years left to practice, 15 years left, into the future, that you're still improving enrollment and retention, that's almost $4.5 million of additional revenue by just simply getting better at converting people with your care planning and keeping them longer. I want to clarify something here. This is not you spending money on marketing and getting more new patients. This is not you introducing some new product. This is not you, selling something else. This isn't you going out and buying some equipment. This isn't you spending more money to grow. This is just you, doctor, improving your skill at care planning, improving your skill at report of findings, and keeping those patients longer. And that all happens. Let me just say this. I've not seen a practice have good retention without having good enrollments on care plans. It's the foundation. And that's why we're kind of harping on this topic here, and we're going to focus on it today. I just want you to see literally the potential that's available. We're talking millions of dollars in the rest of your career over the course of 10, 15 years, or whatever it may be, as a result of you getting better at this stuff. Here's a link. You can go do this on your own later if you want to take a screenshot of this, or you want to just write it down, cashpractice.com/money potential. You can go use this calculator on your own, and you can put in your own practice data and see what the numbers turn out to be for your own practice. Again, cashpractice.com/money potential, and you yourself can see how much money is left on the table, or you're leaving on the table, if you don't get better at your conversions and your retention, starting with your care planning. So again, the goal was, we went from 13 out of 20 new patients enrolling and 20 stat PVA to 1838, and resulted in almost over $4.5 million of revenue. That's literally should be exciting you right now. I mean, what difference in your life would that make from the standpoint of the things you can do in life? We all know that money gives you the ability to do a lot of things in life. And, I don't need to sell you on the idea that $4.5 million is a big number. Whether it's that number, or it turns out to be 2 million in your life, or 1 million, or 8 million, we've seen it all over the place. It really just depends on you and your practice, but the potential is there by improving these things.
And we find that our doctors who are doing this, which are going to go over and show, our doctors are getting these results that we're talking about. The way it's impacted their life is they're able to hire more staff. They're able to buy equipment. They may be able to open another location. They can save for retirement. They have more freedom in practice. They're not tied to the business all the time. They can spend time on vacation or with their families.
And this is not an overnight thing. This is something that happens over time. What I'm showing you on the screen now is a case study from a client of ours who back in 2010 started doing this stuff. 2010, here we are in 2014, almost 14 years ago, right? And each year you could see how their revenue went from 270, hundreds of thousands per year. And then they had their first $1 million year in 2018. 8 years later, they were at 1.1 million. And then they hit 1.3 million, 1.7 million, 2.2 million. Here's another practice who went from 1.8 million in 2017 to almost 5 million in 2023. Right? Another practice that went from 1.5 million to 3.2 million. All of these practices are doing care planning. They're doing monthly recurring payments. They're doing the things that we teach in order to add more patients to the practice. But more importantly, they're not losing them. The only practices that grow like this month after month and year after year are those who continually convert new patients to care, and more importantly, retain them. And the reason I'm kind of drilling this in is because care planning, this is the outcome of care planning. There's more to it than just care planning, but care planning is the foundation of this, that if you're not properly doing it, the others don't really matter. So that's why we're, again, driving this. And care planning is the driving forces of your conversion and retention. Our doctors and our clients and the people doing this just over and over, story after story, like Dr. Felicity here, who went from almost nobody signing up, I don't want to say nobody, she had about a 20% enrollment rate, to learning this stuff and having close to 100% enrollment rate in her care plans. Or Dr. Michelle Wozniak, who went from a PVA of 12 to 15 to close to 50 at the time of this recording. Or Dr. Jason Day, who says that over 90% of his patients are converting to long-term care as a result of doing this stuff. Care plans are crucial. So let's get into this topic now of how do you build them? What do they look like? What's the best formula for doing this? What are the compliance side of things? Because it's not just, let me do what my buddy down the street does. We got to have a strategy in what we're doing here. So let's go through this. Care plans. Care plans are a reflection of the patient's treatment plan. So what do we mean by that? If your treatment plan, your time commitment, your comprehensive program is 6 months of care, then your care plan is 6 months. which means your payment plan. The care plan is, let me clarify. The care plan represents the time and money. Time and money. The treatment plan is just the time commitment. So we're saying your care plans are a reflection of your treatment plan. What we're saying is the time and money commitments of your care plan should mirror, should match, should be the same as what your treatment plan is. So if your treatment plan is 6 months, then your care plan, which is the money and all that stuff, needs to be 6 months. If it's 8 months, it should be 8 months of care plan. So whatever your treatment plan is, that's what the care plan should be. Do not have a treatment plan of, let's say, 6 months, but I want my payments to be only 3 months. Or my treatment plan is 6 months, but I want the patient to finance it over 12 months. Do not do that. When you get things out of sync, that will sabotage your patient's ability to transition to wellness care. That in order to transition people successfully to wellness care, you need to make sure that their payments are in sync with their treatment plan. Care plans cover all the care the patient will need during the course of treatment. That's a no-brainer. It covers their adjustments, their therapies, their orthotics, their nutrition, cervical pillow, whatever it is you do in your practice, laser therapy, whatever you do, it's all incorporated comprehensively right from the beginning. Care plans include all services, including those covered and not covered by insurance. So many times we do care planning that incorporates insurance, meaning there's some of the services we're providing are covered that you're going to be submitting to an insurance carrier for reimbursement. You include those, the copays, et cetera. You'll include those, and we'll show you how to do that here. You include those as part of the care plan. The benefit to you of doing that is that when the insurance is exhausted, let's say a month in the care, you started the program of care with someone, 1 month in, the insurance is exhausted. Well, it's a non-factor because you don't have to go to your patient and say to them, hey, your insurance is exhausted. We need to change what you're doing. If you've been in the model, let me just say this. If you've been in the model where people use their insurance and when the insurance is exhausted, you then try to convert them to cash and do something else, that never works. It just doesn't work well. What works much better is right from the beginning, you build a comprehensive program, you incorporate the insurance as part of it. And when the insurance is part of it, it's a non-issue that when the insurance is exhausted, there's no conversation you have with the patient. Just the plan just continues on because they've already committed to it. It eliminates patients dropping out of care because the insurance stopped. It's very common that in practices that don't do this to lose patients when the insurance is exhausted. Suddenly the patient's better, right? In their mind, oh, my insurance is done. Oh, I'll see you next year. I'm better, right? That's where their brain goes, is they don't continue with the services. So we want to avoid that. Care plans must be compliant to satisfy the good faith estimate you're legally required to provide per the Federal No Surprises Act of 2022. So in America, in the United States in 2022, there was a new law passed called the Patient No Surprises Act. It's a federal law that requires you doctors, all of us, to basically give the patient what's called a good faith estimate. What's a good faith estimate? It's basically a care plan. It's basically giving the patient a document that shows them what you estimate the care is going to be and what the financial responsibilities or what the financial cost is going to be. You must do this legally with patients. So if you're anticipating, so much care, well, then you need to disclose it to the patient. I'm anticipating this much care. These are the costs, etc. That's a requirement legally now. Care plans are not presented until a patient has agreed to your treatment plan. Okay. So when we teach, we're not doing this today, but when we teach a day 1, day 2, how you do a report of findings, all that stuff, one of the critical things we teach is this very topic right here, that you do not go over money with a patient, which is the care plan, until the patient is committed to the treatment plan. So generally what we'll teach is doctors, your job at a report of findings is to get a yes to care, yes to the treatment, or a yes to time. And then once you've gotten that, then the CA's job is to go over money. So we say here, care plans, which is the money, are not presented to the patient until the patient has agreed to your treatment plan. That is a critical thing for a successful day 1, day 2. Care plans can be presented to the patient by either the doctor or the assistant. We get this question all the time, who should be presenting it? Doesn't really matter. Ideally, a CA or an assistant should be the one presenting finances in a practice. But if you don't have an assistant, it's no big deal. A doctor can do it too. Here's what not to do in practice when it comes to care plan. Let me show you some of the common things we see that you should not be doing. It isn't uncommon for us to hear doctors come to us or have them come to us where they're doing their own spreadsheets, where they come up with Excel spreadsheets to calculate their own plans. That was okay many years ago, but it's not okay today because of the fact that it's likely not compliant. Typically, when it comes to the calculations these things do, 99% of the time when we see these spreadsheets, they're not calculating things properly. They're not doing them where if you're doing any kind of discounting, they're being applied appropriately. And as a result, the calculations are, quite frankly, just not compliant. So we encourage you not to use spreadsheets. It's not a great way of doing things. if I was to share with you the back engine that does all the calculations that our tool provides, it's a very, how do I put it? I don't say it's complicated, but it's not as simple as you might think where you're just
It's
adding up
complex.
services. It's not. It's not a simple calculation. So when it comes to doing things properly and compliantly, just leave the spreadsheets alone. Even though you think it might be right, I'm telling you, likely is it's not calculating things correctly. Not only that, but you have to have proper terms with your agreements. It's not just the mathematical calculations. There's the legal terms that go on your agreements, all the terms that are required by the good faith estimate. There's a lot of things that go into the actual document that you're going over the patient. The days of doing these handwritten things, we take a sheet of paper and fill in the blank and take a calculator, that's long gone. That might have worked in the 80s and back in the day before computers. But in today's world, people are expecting things to be professionally done. You know, imagine going to a car rental place and the contract they do is a handwritten contract, or imagine buying a car and everything's filled in by hand. Those days are long gone, and you want to make sure that the documents you're providing to people are professional and properly done. Plus, the handwritten thing is just prone to errors and mistakes. And all of this left generally leads to stress at the front desk. That's what this is representing here. That CAs get frustrated. When we interview the offices that are not doing things properly, usually the front desk is in chaos. And we want to, like Holly mentioned earlier, we want to have joy in the practice. We want things running smoothly, and you want to streamline things. So we can discourage you from doing any of those things here. Really, the proper way of doing things is to have a care plan that looks like what you're seeing on the screen right here. A professionally written document, has legal terms, and everything is calculated properly. You can count on it being a compliant program. So let's go through what a proper compliant care plan looks like and what goes into these components. Care plans require the following. Number one is they require a compliant fee schedule. Number two is they require, if you're going to do any kind of discounts in your plans, which most of the time you're going to have some kind of discount in your program, those must be compliant discounts. Number three is you must have a compliant good faith estimate. That is the legal requirement of the Patient No Surprises Act. And number four is if you're going to do any kind of collecting of that money, of course, you're going to have a compliant way of collecting that money. So there's a lot of compliance side of things that go into your proper care plans. So again, just because your buddy down the street is doing it a certain way doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way of doing it. In fact, I'm not one to use fear. That's not my thing, but I just want to share with you that when it comes to doctors getting in trouble for doing things or ending up in front of state boards with complaints or having lawsuits against them for malpractice, there are two leading reasons doctors get in trouble. Number one is, unfortunately, sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct is literally the number one reasons doctors get in trouble and end up losing their licenses or end up in front of state boards, etc. The second one is financial matters, whether it be insurance malpractice, fraudulent claims, or it has to do whether they're handling the way they handle their finances. It's the second leading reason doctors get in trouble. So for that very reason, it's why we put so much emphasis on the compliance side of things, because if you don't do it right, it's a very good chance you may get in trouble for what you're doing. So again, it's not to strike fear in people. It's just simply, we want you doing things right. So let's go through this. When it comes to compliant fee schedules, let's just say this. Very simple. Your fee is your fee is your fee. What do I mean by that? Every one of your CPT codes you have, every single one of them should have a single fee. Single fee. Not different fees. You don't have an insurance fee, a cash fee, a work comp fee, a Medicare fee. You have a single fee. There's no such thing as cash fees. Just eliminate that from your lexicon. Your bill is the same fee per code for all case types. So whether you're Medicare, cash, insurance, work comp, PI, doesn't matter. If you have a fee for a code, it's the same fee for everybody. And when it comes to the compliant fee schedule, you must disclose that to people. They need to be aware of that. The only time we offer a discount, so let's talk about discounts for a second here. And we're not going to spend too much time on this stuff. But I just want to kind of touch on it. When it comes to discounting, if you're going to do any kind of discount on your plan, which is not uncommon to do, there's only 4 times we offer discounts. Number 1 is required by mandate. Number 2 is documented hardship. Number 3 is contractual agreement. And number 4 is compliant prompt pay. Let's talk about each of these. Required mandate. This is where you participate, let's say, in Medicare. By accepting a Medicare patient, your fee is, let's say, $60 for a service. By mandate, you've agreed to accept lower reimbursement. You've been mandated to accept a discounted reimbursement. That's in essence what we mean there. Your fee is still the same, but you're getting less of a reimbursement. Number 2 is hardship. Hardship is where you basically say, for this group of people, I'm applying a discount. Here's the group of people it might be. You might say people who fall within certain level of the poverty guidelines in the federal government. They qualify for a certain discount in the practice. Or you might say all military personnel get a discount in my office and they would fall under hardship. Just to keep it really simple, hardship is not, let me clarify, not where you say all cash patients get a discount. They do not qualify for hardship. It has to be a group of people like single moms, college students, people who fall within federal poverty guidelines. You can make up the rule, but nonetheless, those people get that discount regardless of who's paying the bill. Number 3 are compliant discounts that are contractual agreements. These are, you're a provider for an insurance company, and by contract, you've agreed to accept lower reimbursement. You maybe work as a provider for Blue Shield or Aetna, and they provide you a fee schedule that says you get $30 for a visit. Well, they are saying your fee is $30. And what I'm telling you, that's not true. Your fee is actually your $50 or $60 fee, but you've agreed by contract to get lower reimbursement. So by contract, you are getting they are compliantly discounting the reimbursement to you. That's what we mean by that. That's what happens when you're contractually in an insurance program. The other one is a DMPO or discount medical plan. I'll come back to that in just a moment. The 4th type of discount you can do that's compliant is what we call a prompt pay discount. The prompt pay discount is simply where you're offering the patient a discount for promptly paying you. Now, there's a limit on how much you can discount for non-covered services, and that limit was imposed by the OIG, the federal government in America. The Office of the Inspector General basically says the maximum discount you can do for a prompt pay is 15%. So that means, doctors, if you're providing any kind of prompt pay discount in your office for people promptly paying you, whether you call it a bookkeeping discount or whatever you want to call it, just don't call it a cash discount. It's a prompt pay or a time of service or that type of thing. The most you could do is a 15% discount. If you need to do larger than a 15% discount in your practice, that's where we go back to the contractual agreements. That's where a DMPO comes in. That's a discount medical plan organization. One of the companies in chiropractic that does it is Chiro Health USA. They're an organization that when you become a provider for them, by contract, you can offer larger discounts to your patients who enroll in that program. If you need more information about that, you can contact us at a later time regarding that. But ultimately, it's a resource for helping you do discounts greater than 15% should you require to do so. We find in most practices, 15% is more than enough discount to do your care plans. But again, if you need to do larger, that's an available tool. That's
Dr.
your compliant
Watson,
discount. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to share with you, we're coming up on about 10 minutes left.
Yes, I'm aware of that. That's kind of why I was kind of, I don't want to say speeding through that section, but kind of hitting the highlights there. When it comes to your compliant care plans, here's the thing. There are a number of things that go in it. They have all the services and fees clearly itemized. The discounts that are being applied are on non-covered services only. There's a compliant terms of agreement and includes the good faith estimate disclaimer. Holly, I think this is a good time now to go into showing them a care plan in the actual care plan calculator. We want to make sure you see how you actually build these care plans and actually how you enroll someone in care using the care plan. Now, when someone does work with us, should you decide to work with us, not only do we give you the tools, and I'm going to let you share your screen now. I'm going to stop sharing. Not only do we give you the tools and the software of how to actually do this, but we also give you the resources on how to present these to patients. That we actually have a library, maybe Holly, you can highlight that just for a moment here, that we have a library in our system called the Academy. And in that Academy, there's a whole host of videos on teaching you how do you present care to a patient? How do you go over finances with the patient? The communication side of things, if you want to say. But what we want to show you right now, and Holly's going to share with you, is how do we actually build a care plan and how do we actually enroll someone into that program of care?
Yes. So in this example, I'm logged into my account and I've created templates, and these are customizable templates that I have preloaded. And so imagine this afternoon, there's a patient coming in for a report of findings. And Dr. Bodson says to me, Holly, John's coming in this afternoon. I'm going to be recommending 36 visit, 6-month care plan. Now, I, as the CA, I know that this patient has insurance. And so I'm going to locate my template, 6-month, 40 visit care plan. Sorry if I misspoke a moment ago and said 6 months, 36 visits. And I'll locate my template, and I'm now going to use this template and customize it for this patient. Now, some of you may have just noticed I'm using insurance in this care plan. This is a Blue Cross Blue Shield template where this insurance company is going to cover 10 visits, but the patient has a $35.50 copay, and I legally cannot discount those copays. So my discount rule is set as full fee. Now I have the remaining 30 visits not covered by insurance, therapies not covered, exams not covered, and a healthcare class. And I've defined my discount rules appropriately to maintain compliance. So next, I'm going to go ahead and add in my patient name. And I'll just find our patient here, and now we'll calculate. So I'm doing this in preparation for the report of findings. We can see here on the right side of the screen our good faith estimate, the totals with the services, products, and what it costs if the patient enrolls into a payment plan, our in-house payment plan, and we're applying compliant discounts. And then down below here, we have our 3 different payment options. Payment option 1 is recurring monthly payments spread out over the treatment period. Our second payment option is a larger down payment followed by smaller monthly payments throughout the treatment period. And our third payment option is prepayment, and that's a payment in full today. And you can see the savings will increase depending on the payment option that the patient is choosing. So these 3 payment options are, there's some psychology behind why we're offering these payment options. And we don't have time to get into that today, but essentially we want to establish a monthly payment habit into the patient's household budget, because it's going to be much easier to transition them onto the next phase of care or wellness program when they do not have a new purchase decision to make, and it's chiropractic care is part of their household budget. So there's some additional settings on the left. I can continue to turn the knobs and dials and customize this further, but it is customized for this particular patient. Now at this point, I'm ready to go ahead and print off this care plan, and it's ready to now be presented to the patient when the financial conversation comes up about care. But remember earlier, Dr. Bodson said it's important when you're care planning that the doctor needs to get a commitment from the patient about time, which is the treatment plan. And once there's a confirmed yes, I can do this, I can commit 40 visits over the next 6 months, that's when we teach you how to then present this plan to the patient and go over the financial options. I do want to show you that it's not just one page, it's a multi-page professional agreement between the patient and the practice in regards to their financial responsibilities, as well as what happens if they stop care early and they have a balance due. What happens if they get an automobile accident or a work-related injury? What happens if they miss appointments? All of the what ifs are clearly handled so that there is no confusion about what the patient needs to expect should these different situations happen. And then
I'll just say real quick, briefly, that again, I go back to the reason doctors get in trouble sometimes over finances. And one of the biggest reasons is a dispute over refunds. And that's why it's so important to have this kind of terminology clearly defined in there, what happens. So when there's what ifs, it's not just, hey, what if that happens? When it does happen, because it does, how are you handling it? And do you have legal recourse on that?
Yes, thank you. The next thing, as Dr. Bodson said earlier, in regards to the Patient No Surprises Act, we do need to have good faith estimate disclaimers. In whether it's a care plan or a block of care or one visit at a time, this does need to be presented to the patient. So that language is in here as well as the authorizations the patient is giving you in regards to auto-debiting the money from their bank account or credit card for the payment plan they choose, authorizing you to charge their card on file if they stop care early and there's a balance due. So it's a comprehensive, compliant service agreement between the patient and your practice, and it really makes a big difference. Now let's say that we presented the patient the care plan and they said yes to care. With one simple click of this button, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to automate the way the payments are being collected. So this patient chose payment option 2. We're going to collect a down payment of $1,007 today and then schedule future remaining payments of $298 a month. I'm going to go ahead and add in a patient's credit card or bank account to collect the down payment. And I'm going to choose how they want to, what payment method they want to use for their future recurring payments. And then I will hit this enroll button. When I hit the enroll button, a lot of different things are happening in the background to make my job as a CA much easier. I'm going to capture digital signatures, and I do have a digital signature device where I'm asking our patient to go ahead and sign, and I'll apply their signature throughout the care plan along with their initials. So I'm asking my patient for their initials, and I'm going to apply those throughout the care plan. And when I have the patient start signing, it's going to apply those digital signatures throughout, and you can see it shows up. This is a great way to be compliant, making sure I have collected signatures. The patient's aware of their payment dates and the amount coming out. They're aware of everything that they need to be aware of. I'm going to give them a printed copy with their signature and initials on it. And then in this case, I'm not talking to the patient again until it's time to transition to maintenance or wellness care net. It really makes it smooth operations. And this is how you end up with patients who are more compliant. They're getting better clinical outcomes. And then also it's increasing your practice revenue. So as I wrap up here, Dr. Bods, I'm going to have you share your screen. Again, I know people are asking in the chat section, how do they learn more about this?
Yeah, let me share that, and I'll just share with her. But great job explaining that, Holly. You did a wonderful job there. And when it comes to the care plan, I want to emphasize what Holly just did in that enrollment process. That will become literally your doctor and your CA's best friend. That you've just knocked out a bunch of things. You got the compliant agreement. That's a digital, paperless storage for you. You have your auto debit running, you have your initial payment process, you have everything taken care of. And I'll also share with you that that document now is there to protect you. That's what it's there to do, is protect you and your practice as to what that patient is committed to. So if someone wants to work with us or learn more, let me just share with you what happens. We have what's called a quick start onboarding that if you were to work with us, very simple. Step one is we get your account set up. Step two is we have a new member orientation with you and your practice. So just like we're meeting by Zoom right now, an account manager is assigned to you, and that account manager works with you directly to get you set up and answer your questions, etc. One of the first things they'll do with you is step three, which is a strategic growth plan, which is basically they'll come up with a plan as to what's the best way of implementing this in your practice. Meaning every practice is a little different, and depending on specific needs of your practice, we'll customize the onboarding process specifically to your practice to make sure people are being trained properly. And that's it. It's a very simple three-step process. I will share with you that our reviews are incredible. If you go online and look at Cash Practice reviews across the board, we are a 5-star review. In fact, I'll ask you the question, doctors. If you were to go onto Amazon right now and buy a product, I think you're like me in that you'll look at products that have 4 stars or 5-star reviews, and anything with 3-star reviews or less, you're probably ignoring. You're probably not buying that product. I know that's how I operate. And anytime I've asked that of other people, they say, yeah, I don't buy something unless it has a 4.5-star review on Amazon. And I'm sharing with you Cash Practice. If you look at us compared to other things out there that are similar, like in the payment processing world, there's some other payment processors out in chiropractic that chiropractors like to look at. They all have 2.5-star reviews. Cash Practice across the board, we're a 5-star company, and we continue to do so. For example, Daniela here, who says that we've used Cash Practice for more than 5 years, and we love how user-friendly the software is. And or Michael here, who says we've been using Cash Practice for over 10 years, and it's so easy, etc. You could go look at them on your own, but we're very proud of the fact that people have taken the time out of their life to go write a review for us and continue to give us great reviews. Some of you may know Dr. Tony Ebel, who runs the pediatric experience. He's been a longtime client of Cash Practice and has all of his doctors at his pediatric program using Cash Practice. There's a reason for that, because they're very heavily into their care planning, and there's a reason they refer business to us. Or Dr. Jason Day, who was shared with you earlier also, who talked about his PVA going through the roof, etc. Just doctor after doctor having great things to say about us. Really, that's it. You call us up, give us an opportunity to chat with you one-on-one. You can book a call with us at cashpractice.com/success. Cashpractice.com/success. Get the words out of my mouth right here. And we'll be happy to have you speak with one of our revenue growth experts who will be happy to share with you how Cash Practice can potentially help you in your practice, answer your questions, and be of service to you guys. So with that being said, Holly, I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks for your guys' time today. Any last parting words?
Yes, no, I've put links in the chat. I've answered all questions, but if you have any more questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. We are grateful that you shared your last hour with us, and we appreciate what you're doing to make a better impact on your community through chiropractic. You guys have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Bye-bye.